Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call the special city council meeting on May 29th, 2024 to order. Ms. Cassandra.
Council Mayor David Romero.
Here.
Councilor Marvin Martinez.
Present.
Councilor Barbara Casey. Councilor Michael Montoya.
Present.
Councilor David Olivali.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a forum.
Mr. McCollum will lead us in prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilman Olivali will lead us in the prayer of silence.
Too much to say, but I want to thank for all our employees, all our citizens here in Las Vegas, elderly grandpas that are some of our city. Just keep all everybody in prayer, keep all the city in prayer. Thank you.
Mayor, approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councilman Montoya, do I have a second? Second by Councilman Olivali. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? You guys have it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next on the agenda is public input. We have public input today. Moving on to our approval of minutes for May 8th and May 15th, 2024.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. A motion by Councilman Martinez, do I have a second? Second by Councilman Montoya. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? You guys have it.
Mr. Mayor, moving on to our business items. Our first item is request approval of the City of Las Vegas interim fiscal year 2024-2025 operating budget. We have our finance director, Mr. Morris Madrid.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before we get into the actual budget, I'd like to give you a little background. First of all,
Real quick, Mr. Madrid. Councilor Casey, can you hear Mr. Madrid? Okay, thank you.
I'll make sure to speak up, Councilor. First, I want to thank the Mayor and Council for allowing us your time to have this special meeting today. I know it's not an easy thing to do. I also want to thank our manager, Tim Montgomery, for his support during this whole process. And Mayor, you made a remark last time that made me regret not saying anything. The manager has my full support, and I'm comfortable saying the whole management team support. So that's for the public and governing body here. The last thank you that I would like to say is because this document that you've had in your hands for a little while is very detailed, very thick. It's hard to understand, and it is not easy to put together. You know, I would say that we're lucky we got it done, but there was no luck involved. It was all hard work. And that hard work came from a very cohesive team. And I asked that team to be here today. So I'm gonna pick on Dominic, Anthony, Darlene, and Anna Maria. There are people that will see an accident on the road or a building that's burning, and some will run to help, and some will run away. And this group ran to the fire and helped and got it done. And not only that, we lost almost half of our crew to either temporary or permanently. And they picked up the slack, continue to get things done. And I'm not a small guy, and they hold me up all the time. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the process in formulating this budget. There's a DFA process and there's a City of Las Vegas process. And normally they should run parallel. The DFA process requires certain things that depend on the processes that we use in the city. They have an ideal schedule that they put out every year for the budgeting process to begin in February. Well, the city initially did begin that process, and it got kind of bogged down along the way, and for good reason. We didn't follow that process entirely. We took a 12-week process and shrunk it into 5 weeks. That's one factor. Another factor is that we have 2/3 of our management team, including myself, that were not here a year ago, and that have not been previously involved in this process. We also did not take this document to the finance committee. All of those things are outside the regular process. But I want to assure you, and you'll see as we go through this, that you have a quality document in front of you. Now, it doesn't state that we're going to do any particular projects, give any individuals any compensation. It builds the capacity to do what we need to do. It gives us the flexibility to do what we need to do so that the governing body can set priorities and the management team can execute. So really, that's the purpose of this budget. Next year, we'll have a better process. The key is going to be planning from the governing body and the management team with the support from finance. So although this is a good budget, next year we can do better. And I look forward to that. I can tell you that the way that we handled the process internally, because we didn't involve constant meetings with the management team, we had some, absolutely not enough. But as they submitted their requests, if they were flat and they were reasonable, we left them alone. That's 2/3 of this budget. And those are the ones that, unless we need to go back to, I'm not going to touch on. Our emphasis was placed on the variances. Who's going to need more money and why? What for? Is it a special project? Is it more compensation? What is it? Those we did have major discussions on, and we'll be able to have those discussions here too. This is an interim budget. It needs to be approved and uploaded into DFA's system by June 1st. That's midnight on Friday night. This deadline is not negotiable at all. This is the only deadline regarding finances that is set in state statute. If it's not done, it's technically a violation of the law. So the final budget is due July 31st. We expect only to see changes in cash balances. I'll talk about those in a second. They're on our summary sheet. So there are some highlights that are not budgetary. But with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I have 20 items that are a little bit outside of normal. Not necessarily abnormal, but what I did was I flagged the ones that were a variance by a certain percentage. And those are the ones that I would talk about. All of the other ones, the ones that I don't mention, are within 1.5%, 2%, and do not involve any major program changes. So they're business as usual. There's a whole group of funds, for example, the seizures, donations, awards, those type of funds. They have $5,000 or $10,000 in them every year. They don't change, and they won't change. They've been the same way for the last 5 years. They'll be the same way for the next 5. But we can discuss those later if we need to. So with your permission, Mayor, if there's any other format that's desired, let me know. If not, then I'll go ahead and get started.
Questions from the council? If not, we'll proceed and then we can ask the questions after. Go ahead.
Okay, on the very first sheet, it's the summary sheet. The heading says rounded to the nearest dollar. It shows beginning and ending cash balances on either side. This is a summary of the entire budget by fund, by cash. This is the first one that DFA looks at because these cash balances are estimated along with our budgeted investments, budgeted revenues, transfers, expenditures. The ending cash balances on these have to be 0 or greater. If there's a negative cash balance, they will not accept it because that means that we're spending money that we don't have. So all of the budgets that you see after this roll together and they tie to their particular fund here. The cash balances are the most critical of the budget items that DFA reviews when it gets there. So if you will never see a negative ending cash balance. As long as we operate within that, we're okay. On the next page, the general fund budget revenues. I want to highlight a few of the increases. They're not major increases, but they are solid increases in gross receipts tax. The first one is in line 5103, also 5113 and 5114. Those were adjusted to be increased a little bit, but still not at the level that we're anticipating collecting this year. So they are conservative, but they are increased. The next one that you'll see with a fairly good change on it is in court fees, 5401. That's a reduction because that looks like a short-term, maybe a long-term trend. We didn't want to budget anything that we weren't going to collect. All the other ones are fairly stable and not very large. So the overall increase to the budgeted revenues comes from these amounts. The next page that I want to talk about is the general fund budget. That's about 3 pages later. Revenue, expenditures, and transfer summary. The reason that I want to talk about this is there is percentages at the bottom line of total general fund expenditures near the bottom of the page. You see 5.4%, 34.24%, all the way up to 34.96%. Those are trends over the last 5 years. What I want to highlight is that while our revenues have grown by 49% over that period, expenditures have only grown by 35%. So the city is being managed well. It's in a good financial position, and the trends are going the way they should. Revenues are rising, and expenditures are rising, but at a little bit lower rate. The next highlight, it's not a very big one, but I think we would get in trouble if we didn't talk about the mayor's budget. It's the mayor's budget, Department 2025. It's about 5 pages later. And it's a minor increase, but I didn't want to get the question, Morris, how come you didn't talk about that one? So it's a small increase to travel and to get some additional furniture for the executive office. That's missing material there. The next one is the city manager budget. That's a couple of pages later. And the major increase there is for attorney's fees. That's really the only increase there. And I'll let Mr. Montgomery discuss that.
So Mayor and Council, this line item is a combination of $40,000 for the forensic audit and then also $100,000 for the consulting we're doing with our grants. They are merged and put under the attorney fee. We may, depending on how the forensic audit goes, maybe have residual that needs to be moved to the grant consultant. Yes, sir.
Mayor and Council, the next department that I want to highlight is the city attorney budget. That's about 4 or 5 pages later. And there's an increase there in attorney fees also from 20,000 to 75,000.
Mayor and Council, I did request adding $55,000 to the current budget, and this is for the charter review process.
Mayor and council, the next major budget that I'd like to look at is the police department. It's 4 or 5 pages later. I want to let you know that in the column that says budget 2024, there's an issue with that link in the spreadsheet. So for comparison, you should refer to the previous column where it says budget 2023. So the change in compensation from one year to the next would be from budget 2023 to budget 2025. There's a change in total compensation there, both salaries and benefits. There's also a change in subscriptions and dues. This is for the initiative that the police department is taking, and in the cameras require a monthly, annual subscription service for the recording and maintenance of the files and all that. That's what this is for. That is this year's, it's a recurring thing, but I'm not sure what the future year's expense will be. But that's what that's for. The next one is insurance deductibles. Insurance deductibles are the portion that the city has to pay if we're engaged in any tort claims or litigation or anything like that. There's a portion that we have to pay. And we saw an increase in it this past year, and we included this amount as an estimate for the coming year. That's what those are for. Also, 2 pages later, still within the police budget, you'll see increases in 7401, maintenance of buildings and grounds. In an equipment purchase, well, it's just an increase, they have them every year. And budgeted 120,000 for vehicles for the police department. They're not unusual, they're just a little bit higher. And again, the total budget, you should compare the budget 2023 to 2025, bottom line. The next one, about 6 pages later, is the animal shelter. In dollars, they are not a major increase. In percentages, yes. We have increase in travel and training. We didn't have any budgeted last year at all. We had an increase in uniform expense. And we had an increase in maintenance of buildings and grounds, and that's for the shelter itself. The next one, a couple of pages later, is the fire department. On this worksheet, we have the same issue with a similar link. So again, for compensation, use budget 2023 to compare to 2025. That'll give you the difference between prior year, well, current year and next year. In the fire department, that was basically the only deviation that needs to be highlighted is in compensation. The next one is in public facilities. That's about 3 pages later. On the second page, there's an increase to maintenance everywhere. Buildings and grounds. The street lighting project is there. That's an additional 50,000. And a small increase in the maintenance of road equipment. Again, they're not unusual. They're just dollar amounts that compared to prior year are a little higher. The next one is about 6 or 7 pages later in the General Services Department budget. These are expenses that are shared by the whole city. So they're put together in general services because there's not a single department that benefits from a single line item. They're shared, but they're not, it's generally not worth it to cost them out like utilities. It doesn't matter whether City Hall uses as much electricity as Public Works. It's kind of a fixed cost that we just have to endure. So it's in here. What I wanted to highlight on this page is the increase in the audit expense. Now, this may not even happen, but in anticipation of getting in more federal funds, if the schedule of federal financial assistance gets beyond a certain dollar amount, then they may apply additional procedures. This is a just in case amount. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight with you are in the 72, 74 category down below. There's an increase to professional services. And you'll see amounts budgeted, I think, as you've had in prior years for individual ward initiatives that you all have. And that amount is 250,000. And then there's the other 440,000 that was included in your discussions before, I think. Is that Legion Drive? 440? That's Legion Drive. So those are the highlights for the general services budget. The next one is a few pages later, street improvement gas tax, Fund 216. And the only highlight there is the additional revenues. This tax is related to gross receipts, which increased in the general fund. Part of it comes over here. So there's a related increase over here also. On the expenditure side, there were some increases, again, in maintenance of tools and equipment, right-of-ways, and road equipment. They're not major increases, but they are the next one is 4 pages later, Recreation Fund 280. In 7401, you'll see an increase from maintenance of buildings and grounds from 50,000 to 1,660,000. And that's for the roof. We estimated the cost at 1.5 million. Other than that, budget is very flat. The next one is about 15 pages later. I'll let you get there. Fund 214, street co-ops. There's no funding increase issues here. I only wanted to go over the 3 projects that have been funded and that are in process. Legion Drive, University, and Cristone Circle. And you'll see that they're funded and budgeted for expense just about equally. We have a little surplus there. But those are the projects that are in process that are being funded by the DOT co-op. On the next page, in special legislation and appropriations, we have this schedule is comprised mainly of carryover funding that hasn't been spent and some new funding primarily at the Senior Citizen Center. So this gives you an idea of the projects that were funded by legislative initiatives. They're separate from our own. There's no budget issues there. Revenue and expense equal. The next one is an increase, It's really the same level of funding in capital improvement fund. This one I don't have designated, but it is for capital improvements and it's there because the revenues are there also. This is also based on gross receipts. Before I go into the last one in wastewater, within the enterprise funds, we didn't change a lot because on the revenue and expenditure side, they all came in below the budgeted amounts. And they are dependent upon conditions. For example, water, if it's raining, you don't sell as much water. If it's warm in the winter, you don't sell as much gas. We had both of those this past year. So our budget level was higher than we needed. It's okay because they're enterprise funds and anything that isn't spent is kept. That's the case for water, wastewater, solid waste, and gas. Now, with the exception of solid waste, all of the enterprise funds are collecting more than they're spending. So although they're both below budget, the difference between revenue and expenditures is positive, it's good. In solid waste, it's not that far apart. And it looks like it's not a rate issue or a collections issue. It may be a timing issue where when we provide new service, there's a delay in getting them properly into the billing system. That's being caught up and it should be a positive effect on the revenues this coming year. So that should make up the difference. Both revenues and expenditures should come out pretty close to each other in solid waste. So that's the reason why we didn't lower them, because we didn't want to lower our capacity. As long as we're controlling our expenditures below our revenues on an actual basis, we're fine. So again, this budget just gives us the capacity to do what we need to do. The final highlight that I have is in the wastewater fund, 610. And that's just an increase in professional services. And we can get into a little more discussion, but I believe that this initiative is an initiative so that we can self-perform a lot of our own construction and not depend on contractors so much. But a lot of those projects may require design to make sure that we build them within specifications and the way they're supposed to be. So these are primarily for design. Correct? Okay. So that's what that was for. It's not unusual. And again, we're just building capacity. Beyond the enterprise fund, you're going to see some debt schedules and investment schedules. The debt schedules are included as a requirement to DFA. Those, again, are not negotiable. Those are for loans that we already have in place. We did not include any new financing of any type. We only included the ones that were in place, and they have to be paid. We got to pay our bills. We borrowed the money. The one thing that I will say about that is one area, along with our investments, that we are going to need to review separate from the budget process to see if there's some refinancing opportunities, some other financing opportunities. How is our debt, long-term debt oriented? I know it's been reviewed a little while back. The reason that I think we should do it is because of the clean audit report that the city got for the last year. That combined with reviewing our debt service could provide a lot of opportunity. And I know that you all have different priorities that you need to look at. This would give us some funding avenues if it works out properly. It's not overnight, it takes probably a couple of months, but that's another initiative that we're going to be going over. And that's basically the highlights of the budget. Mayor and Council, if you have any particular questions, you have myself. and the department heads here available.
Councilor Casey?
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilors? Mr. Mayor? Councilman Martinez?
Kind of one of the questions I had just in the back of my head was the services or contracts that we have with, let's say solid waste or any of the other entities that we have. If there's a contract change mid-year, what, I know you've got to adjust, I know that, but nothing ever goes down, it always goes up in price. So
Right.
how do you, are you prepared and how will that?
The way it works is, our first option is to find areas within that fund or that department where we can save. And that's been going on. If there is no other alternative, then it's a budget adjustment to increase the appropriated amount within that department. And we would have to have the reserves in place to do that for that fund. That requires approval of the council and DFA.
One other question that I did have, and I think you mentioned this when you started, this document was not, am I correct in saying that, not approved by Finance Committee?
No, it wasn't even presented to the finance committee.
Was it presented at all?
No,
Is that necessary to have gone through that step?
it's a good idea. It's a very good practice. And, we have a good finance committee that scrutinizes everything. Can I say that, Counselor?
Sure.
And it would have been ideal to present it to them and let them pick it apart.
I know some of those vendors, so I know you're spot on, I'm sure. Okay. Right. No other questions?
Mr. Mayor? Councilman Kimani?
Thank you, Melissa. I know you came and you leave for, I didn't, maybe a month before to get this budget going. I thank your staff is really super good. They do a good job. I really, I'm going there, talk to it. I don't talk about too much about the budget. But the way they perform their job and they're serious about what they do is really important to the city. And I just want to thank the staff down there and the rest of them. Darlene, she's almost to leave the city under last year or 3 months that she's been here for 20-some years. So I want to thank her for all the work you've done for the city. You're super, you get the city running and the finance people that work with you and all the employees that work with you. Thank you for everything. Mr. Morris, I know it's going to take me a little time to kind of work and see what kind of work you do. And I know you're a city manager, you did some things for the city, so, try to get confidence in them. But, thanks for what you're doing and your stuff.
It's a team thing, and I got a good team.
Thank you.
Councilman Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd also like to thank the staff. I think we have the best staff in the northern part of the state as far as finances. We have exceptional directors and team players coming on board with our council and our city manager. I want to thank our director, Mr. Morris Madrid. Also, our city manager, Mr. Tim Emery. We hired him as a finance director to begin with. Moved him up to city manager. So we got a double whammy with both of you guys. I did go for the budget with both the finance director and the city manager. I had 20 questions that they answered for me, so I will be asking those questions. But I do want to say that I want to thank you putting in the $40,000 for the audits ahead of time. That will be avoiding any other budget adjustments throughout the year. And I noticed you have probably about 7 of them in this budget that we won't have to be adjusting down the road, bringing them back to Mayor and Council. Also, on the $55,000 for review of the city charter, a little bit of a explanation, clarification on that is that, you know, the committee or the members of that board will not be getting paid. They're volunteers. This is for legal services as well as publications or anything like that that might need. And thank you for adding that to it. This will have to come back to the council for approvals. Also, something long time coming, which is the rec center. That roof has been ignored for the last 5 years, and it started getting worse and worse. And you guys took the initiative and being proactive, to put that money aside, get it done, so we can get back on track on that. I do have one concern. That one concern is on utilities, and I saw we had like 10 Mexico Finance Authority loans on there for different amounts. And I think that Mayor and Council should, or the city manager should start monitoring those loans more closely. I think that we need to kind of set some kind of a cap, 10,000, 100,000. Some of those loans that some of those aren't even council. And I think that's wrong. And I think that needs to be fixed. Other than that, as far as the money's coming in, solid waste or gas or any other utilities, we're hurting on the 365 cutoffs that we do have for natural gas. We are hurting on collections on solid waste that hasn't been done for quite a few months. New collections, new trash bins, and also, we need to reevaluate who's paying and who's not paying for taking trash to our facility. I think we're going to have amnesty days coming up, but the thing is that I don't know, everyone that's taking trash there, including contractors, are paying for their fair share. So we might be missing some revenues there. But other than that, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the Finance Committee, as chairman, I went through the budget myself, and I wish we would have taken had time to take it through the Finance Committee, we didn't. But since everybody else already spoke, we're ready for a motion. I'm ready to approve this City of Las Vegas interim fiscal year 2024-25 operating budget.
So, motion by Pro Tem Montoya. Take a second. Second by Councilor Casey. I just want to go ahead and commend you guys and the staff. I was able to say, I think, in a couple of preliminary discussion with budget. I know that every director here, thank you guys. I know the big issue is always basically finding employees. How do we keep the employees? Retention, recruitment, and that's a big issue on where we're at, why we can't keep employees because we can't pay them. And I know some of those issues were discussed. Of course, I don't want to go into detail because we do have negotiations and we don't want to kind of throw a price out there or anything, but I think that's important to note that was taken into consideration. Of course, department heads were also asked, certain positions in order to better the departments, right? And I think that was important. Is some of the discussion that I was a part of that I think we need to note. There's a lot of issues, and it's unfortunate we don't have the money to fix everything, right? Councilor Casey, myself, and Tim were at a community meeting, a block meeting, I guess you could say, last night, and one of the streets that we received capital outlay, and of course, 150,000 ain't gonna do what they expected, right? So we were asking, how are you gonna do it? Well, we're doing the best that we can with what we have, and I think that's important to note. As things change, and Morris, you mentioned it, right? A lot of the directors that we have here today weren't here a year ago, you know what I mean? So they're having to understand what the needs are, reevaluate everything. And, we might have changes as we move along, but I think, their input starting out, just continue to move forward and do what we can, right? It's never gonna be perfect. The budget's always a working document. Just thank you guys and Councilor. One thing that I do want to note is in speaking with Jim and some of the things that we've said is let's continue to put some budget, for each councilor as we did, because I think that made a big improvement, which we hadn't until we started. Each one of us had a pot, it's easier for Arnold or whoever is working with that department, thinking, well, where's the money coming from? And when we have that budget, we're able to kind of address some of those needs or priorities within our own boards. So I think that was important. Thank you guys for that. I'll let you, Tim, before I take the roll call, let you say a few comments and let me feel, and I know it wasn't a perfect scenario, it would have been nice. I just want to clarify that we're not against any ordinance or whatsoever. Practice would have been to take it based off of time we couldn't, so we're not in violation of anything. At the end, when you make the decisions, you just want to leave it at that.
Yes, so I'd just like to thank the finance team and our director. I know how hard you work, the number of emails and phone calls, text messages, and everything coming back and forth between myself and the other directors. We gave you a lot of information and you pulled it together in 5 minutes time, which is really amazing. I feel really secure that our budget is sound. Yes, there could be some tweaks here and there, but overall, I think the budget's really good. We built in some things into the budget that hadn't been done in the past. For example, building maintenance is a big concern of ours. We got some monies put in there. The roof for the rec center, I think, is amazing. There's just several areas that we had a lot of conversation and we're able to incorporate those numbers into the budget. So I'm really happy about that. I feel very confident with the numbers that are here. We'll make it through the year. Yes, sir. There is, that is still there, sir. It's the program funding, it's to be able to do repairs to the building itself, yes. So, thank you.
Councilor Uveni? Councilor Latoya?
Yes.
Councilor Casey? Councilor Martinez?
Yes.
I have a motion by Councilor Latoya, second by Councilor Casey. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries. That concludes our agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Martinez, second by Latoya.